I'm recording.
You're recording? Well, shalom and welcome. I don't know if anybody can hear me. There might be a bit of an echo. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there an echo because your mic is open?
Oh. Well, I'm muted.
Okay, good. So before you begin, are there any questions? Let's see here. Any questions, comments? Okay, good. So this is from the perspective of Hod, and the nice thing is I can recycle this 10 different times. I'm totally kidding. The last song is My Pure Soul by Moshav. And I can see if I can find a link on YouTube for it before the room closes and give it to you, because our Moshav band just is one of my favorites, and they have some amazing music. So the nice thing about the slideshow is it's very generic. It's like an outline and a structure. So one of the beautiful things about Hod is this ability to take everything from above and bring it into a solution, not like I would say it's more pragmatic. It's how are we going to take these concepts and ideas and put them into action, into the real world, into the physical realm. In our own construct of our personality, it's that going from the unconscious mind to conscious realization and thought. And a lot of us aren't necessarily at this level of Hod per se, because we don't really understand what's driving the thoughts, the ideas, and our actions. Hod has this direct feed from all of these other forces coming into it. So it has a perception of what concepts, of what ideas, of what's coming into this and feeding into the Sephirot to bring, and it comes up with a solution in a practical application. And if you look at the idea of the psychology of the mind, you have the concept of the unconscious versus the conscious concept of thought. And so we have this idea that the two communicate, but we may not always have a direct connection to our unconscious motivations. A lot of us don't remember a lot of our childhood, but we are soaking it in. And then this is one theory of how, personality and human interaction is driven. And one of that is as a child, from infancy on, that we have all of these inputs, all of these ideas and concepts that are being presented to us, how our parents respond to us, how the people around us respond to us, how all of these things feed into building a construct of who we see ourselves as. And humans are very social animals, and a lot of the construct of self is actually reflected to us from the people around us. And that's a good thing, because living in a society where people have to cooperate, have to work together, having a realization or a concept of yourself being built upon the opinion or view of others is important for interconnectedness. But it can also be very damaging if the people around us are sending us a distorted view of who we are. And in a lot of people, in most people's lives, there's some dysfunction. As a parent, perfect. I'm kidding. But as a parent, we have our own issues. We have our own quirks. We have our own things that we deal with, or when we interact with others. So we may not always be perfect. So the image that we're feeding back of the individual may not always be a true reflection of them. It may be an actual distorted image that we're fed back from others because of their dysfunction and their own distortions. So that interaction can work in a healthy way, but also can work in an unhealthy way. And so the idea of building up to the level of Hod, and again, and the idea of this concept is really important to remember, that it's a two-way street, that we're getting information from the system, but we're also feeding information back. So it's like a feedback loop. So in this idea of Hod, connecting to Hod gives us the realization of implementation, but also gives us this idea of what is feeding into these ideas and thoughts. And so in the psychology of the human mind, you would say this is getting to the level of Hod is the ability to start to see the unconscious motivations, stories that we tell ourselves, starting to see what has fed into the construct of ourself. And it's starting to get to this level of clear in the level of prophecy, it's seeing things more clearly, understanding and perceiving everything all together, and being able to implement in a solution or a Toby can help me at any time, and being able to implement an understanding or a correction in our own personality, or the way that we interact with ourselves, what we say to ourselves, how we interact with each other. So going back to this idea of the shattering of the vessels, this is very important because the whole world has been shattered, the whole world is broken, and it's been designed to do that. And there's a book I actually want Tovia to post. I might stop sharing because there's a little bit I want to read about before we get back into this, to kind of plant some of these ideas, go through some of the concepts that I talked about several weeks ago, but bring it into the concept of Hod. I'm going to stop sharing if Toby wants to get those books. So this is, I played the song Yedid Nefesh. It was the second to the last song. And Yedid Nefesh is beloved of the soul, and so there's a commentary called Yedid Nefesh, and it was written by Rabbi Yechiel Bar Lev, and he is a commentary on various teachings of the Ramchal. So there we go. Toby has it here. So we're talking about this idea of the shattering of the vessels. So this light of God that was utilized, the construct of creation, the spiritual energy, with the shattering of the vessels being filtered down into our world, the idea that you have these primordial vessels per se, or constructs that were shattered, dispersed, and in the 6 days leading up to the creation of Adam, that these broken vessels are being repaired and reconstituted into the final stages of complete rectification. And Adam and Eve were created to bring about that final process of rectification, to bring us into the Olam Haba, into the world to come. And in the Garden of Eden, they failed to do this, and these vessels were left unrectified, and they shattered even further. And so this light, this idea that these shattered vessels are broken apart again, the light that constitutes their very being is buried within physicality. It's trapped in the material. The Ramchal uses this phrase many times, the dark coarseness of physical reality. They're trapped like prisoners, hidden away, like embers buried in the ground. And it's our job to uncover them and to bring them back to life. So going on to this, I'll read a little bit here. It says, the various kinds of godly lights are what constitute and give continual life to various forms of creation. The lights of the world of emanation are so lofty that even the spirit of man cannot perceive their light. And we talked about these ideas of the higher worlds, and I'm not going to get myself too sidetracked because that's not really what I want to get into at this point. So the lights of the world of emanation are so lofty that even the spirit of man cannot receive their light. Man's spirit consists of the lights from the world of creation, which are inferior to the lights from the world of emanation. The idea is, as the light of Hashem is filtered down, the Orient Sof is filtered down, it becomes less and less powerful. It becomes more constricted, more hidden, and they call it inferior at the lower levels. Only a chosen few in any generation can receive illumination from the world of emanation. Lower beings are those which receive godly lights from the world of formation. These are even more inferior neshamot, or souls. These receive light from the world of making. Man's advantage is that through the Creator's service and his own devotion, he can attain a much higher neshama than the one he originally received from the worlds of formation, creation, and emanation as above. In contrast to man, the angels are regarded as creatures of a higher degree who lack man's corporeality and have a pure, more inferior materiality than does man. The angels are given a neshama whose spiritual lights are derived from the godliness of the world of formation, higher than the world of making. However, an angel has no possibility of progressing to a higher level and remains static with regard to its neshama. On the other hand, through his works, man can raise himself up to the level of an angel. Even the spirit of the lowest living creatures, plants, or inorganic matter contains a portion of godliness that sustains each creation according to its station and rank. We see, therefore, that godliness can be found in everything. The extent to which it is revealed depends upon who is searching for it. The higher the observer's spiritual level, the more he will find godliness revealed in all created things, the lowly as well as the lofty. Man can see God's providence revealed, since his providence, guiding power, the diffusion of his will, and the diffusion of godliness are all one and the same. On the other hand, material man cannot see godliness revealed, since it is hidden. Next. From him, even in the loftiest of God's creations. Material man looks for a rational explanation for every phenomenon he comes across and simply does not understand that there are perceptions his mind cannot grasp. He can be compared to a worm that spends his entire life buried deep inside a radish and cries out that his lot is a bitter one. Just try to explain to the worm that if he would like a little sweetness in his life, he has only to wander over to an apple or a fig to find out what sweetness is all about. And so it is that people who spend their entire lives steeped in materialism and relate only to material matters can be urged out of the worlds and shown a higher level where they will become all the wiser and approach the truth. Every creation and being is nothing when compared to the force that created it. This is what takes it from non-existence to existence. And if every animate and inanimate object appears to us to exist, it is because our human eyes cannot perceive God's power and his breath of life in everything. That is to say, material man cannot see godliness and won't stop to gaze upon it. Were we permitted to see, perceive, and examine the living aspect of every creation which flows through it by the virtue of God's command and the breath of his lips, we would not even notice the mundane corporeal aspects. In other words, the more man purifies himself and becomes spiritual in nature, the less will be his tendency to notice corporeal aspects of things and relating to the world around him. So we have a chat. So this is a commentary. It's called Song of the Soul. It's the English translation of Yedid Nefesh by Rabbi Yechiel Bar-Lev. And it's his commentary on a commentary. His commentary on the Ramchal's commentary of the Arizal. So it's commentary inception. So the Hebrew text is called Yedid Nefesh, and the English translation is called Song of the Soul. The author is, I'll post it, Yechiel Bar-Lev. So this is saying is Hod gives us the opportunity to see where all the pieces fit. And we talked, if you were, part of, I think everyone here was read the Ramchal Derek Hashem, and this idea of hashgacha, providence, that the progenitors of the originators of divine providence extends from Netzach and Hod. And so Hod is this ability to see the God, to take the bad, that, the materialism, the coarseness, the darkness of this world, and it creates the opportunity for us to either continue to immerse ourselves in the material world and become more and more deafened to the spiritual world around us, to reality. So engaging in materialism for materialism's sake makes us spiritually deaf and blind, and it extinguishes our soul. It cuts off a connection to the godly world. But Hod also gives us an opportunity to take the material world to see what it's truly here to do and to utilize it effectively and properly. And so when you get to Netzach and Hod, you get a mixture of good and bad. Just like at the higher realm, we talk about at the highest realm of Chokmah, wisdom, and Bina, understanding, that they can, they're matchmates. They kind of work together. They work in synthesis together. And Netzach and Hod have that same kind of relationship, that in the idea of Hashgacha, of divine providence, that they're the buffer system that keeps our world going, that keeps us from destroying ourselves. But the other side, the dark side of that, is by creating this world of materialism and corporeality and hiding the spiritual, which saves us from annihilation. It also means that we can become ensnared in the material world, that we can find a rational scientific explanation and completely leave God out of the equation. And relating that to ourselves, we can really we have two things. We can take the circumstances of our life and get immersed in the losses and the sorrows and the if I only had, or why did this, or the darker circumstances, and really get lost in that kind of train of thought and that kind of living and tell and I call it a narrative that the Hod and Netzach make this narrative in the world here, but also in our mind, that with these forces can create a narrative, either a narrative of, there is no God, or God doesn't love me, or leave God out of the equation because of the bad things that happen to myself and around me. I see no God. I don't understand why horrible things happen. Why do children suffer? And why does war happen? And all of these things. And so that's the dark side of Hod. But the positive side of Hod, the proper application, is saying, these horrible things happen to me because I have been chosen. I'm the only person that can redeem these fallen sparks from even this horrible situation, that I can transform the darkest areas into brilliant light by changing. I can change everything. I can change how this circumstance is going to impact me and impact the world. It gives us the ability and the force and the energy. When the Ramchal talks about it in his commentary, it's to look at our sufferings and see the goodness in them, to sweeten the bitter, to if we see Hod, if we perceive things correctly. And that Hod gives us the ability to see all of the good and the bad in our lives and in the world, and to perceive and understand the cause and the reason for them coming into place. And if you think of the Sephirotic tree, Netzach is connected to Hod, but Hod has a very special relationship, and that special relationship is to Gevurah, to judgment, and there's an idea that sometimes Gevurah can feed right into Hod. They can be connected and bypass the other parts of the system. And so when we don't apply Hod directly, when we don't see the godliness, the reason for everything existing, whether it be, the darker parts of our life or in the world, then instead of having this judgment sweetened, that it becomes actually amplified by direct government. We can become directly connected to the evil forces, the darker side, and lose sight of the good. And so in rectifying Hod and reconnecting this circuit properly, we can integrate all of the experiences of our lives. We can integrate all of human history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We can rise above the mundane details. And I'm not saying people's suffering is mundane, but it is if it doesn't have meaning. So you can rise above the darkness, the materialism, the corporeal aspects of the world, and you can see the spiritual connectivity and the reason for its existence here. And that only comes about through Hod. Hod is the ahad, but the puzzles all together. It's the my Hod moment is, I think of it as at the end of Ushpizin, if you're familiar with that, where Moshe Belanya his wife's left him. He ate his $100 etrog. He's taking down his sukkah, and he's just defeated man. And when his wife comes to him and tells him, I'm pregnant, in her own special way, it all comes together. He sees now. He thought he saw in the midst of all these things, when he gets the money, when the men come, when the men come from prison, he thought he understood it, but he really didn't perceive it at all. He didn't really understand. He didn't have the big picture. And Hod allows us to see where all the pieces fit. And Moshe Belanya's Hod moment is when he's standing on that step stool, taking down his sukkah, and he sees why all these things. He understands now he had to eat the etrog. He had to have all of these things happen for this circumstance to come about. And the idea is that we don't have to wait to the end of our life for this moment to come, that we can actually, through meditation and prayer, connect to this attribute to actually have some shalom, some peace about the things that come to us. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be a doormat or you have to, suffer through really trying things. You definitely, prayer is there for sometimes the request to be made. Sometimes circumstances will change and sometimes they won't. And I truly believe that when you have this level of understanding that emanates from code, then you have the ability to understand why something may be occurring, or gives you the perseverance, the energy, and the connection to continue to persevere through this experience. So this is Hode, and I would say the therapist of Hode is Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl, he just emanates the aspect of Hode, meaning understanding God in the midst of immense human suffering. And Viktor Frankl, what did I say? Oh, Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist living in Vienna, Austria during World War II. And he is Jewish, and his family were deported to Auschwitz. Now, he did not know this, but immediately upon entering Auschwitz, his son, I think who was 3 or 4 at the time, and his wife were immediately murdered. And he lived through various camps for, I think, 2 to 3 years. And he went through death marches, he went through dysentery, and he, being a psychiatrist, he kind of took a step back and was able to create a buffer between him and the suffering that he was facing through saying, taking a scientific mind, which is what Hode has to do. Hode has to be able to say, okay, let's survey the facts and see what the proper response should be. And so he saw that some people who were healthy and strong and well-fed died almost immediately. Others who were thin as bones, who have been there for years, seemed to live, hang on and on and on. They didn't die. And he wanted to know why. Why did this happen? Why do some people die immediately? Why do some people live through these circumstances for years and don't die when they, by all accounts, should? And he realized there was one thing that set the people that lived apart from the ones that didn't, and that was hope. Whether that hope came from spiritual connectivity to God, his hope, he was not a religious man. His hope was found in his family, in his wife, specifically his connection with his wife. So he realized that hope was the thing that would save him, this connection to something to give him purpose, to give him meaning. And so he actually had kind of created an avatar in his mind of his wife and had conversations with her and engaged with her and thought about the future with her. And that was the hope, that was the connectivity that kept him going through horrible circumstances beyond any I could not even imagine. So he wanted to take what he learned in these camps and apply it to people's lives. And he saw that many people destroy their lives. And he wanted to apply what he learned, and so he created a system of therapy called logotherapy. Logo is reason, and he believed that every human being has a purpose, has a reason for being, even in the midst of the most dire circumstances, of the most immense suffering. That there is a reason for every person to be here, and there is something to get them through. So he utilized logotherapy to connect with people who had come through really horrible circumstances such as himself, to create that pathway to connect to the reason of why they're here and what their purpose was. And so he wrote a few books. Man's Search for Meaning was one of his big ones, and he was very successful in implementing this system to reach people who were considered unreachable. And so in modern psychiatry and modern therapy, a lot of times his logos therapy has been modified and changed a bit, but he uses words that are used in different forms of therapy, but the same idea, which is mindfulness, and it's getting in touch with the principles of why you're here, like what's the story of your life. And so Hode is able to, without the expansiveness of the emotional aspect, it's this calculation of, these are the circumstances of my life, this is the reason, seeing the reason you're here, and making a real connection to the reason that you exist. What is your unique purpose for living? What's your unique job? What's your unique What about you is so unique that God wanted you to be here? I'm putting God into it. He was not a religious man, as I stated. But what about you and your circumstances was finally orchestrated by God to bring you about. So the circumstances are orchestrated by Netzach, but how you take those circumstances and you make your life work, that is Hod. That is where we live in Hod. So reading a little bit further, let me see here. Can you go on to page 337, dear? Oh, wait, actually, no. I want to go to 335. Am I? Oh, I am. How convenient. Okay. So if you think of Viktor Frankl and the Rom Call and the Rom Call solution for life, he said this. He says, if you want to know what is the purpose of creation, and he says, well, it's for God to bestow his good on an individual, but what is that good? What is the real good? And the Rom Call's answer for that is to understand that God is one, that there is an absolute purpose and reason for God's existence. And that is that he is one, there is none other, and he wants somebody else to understand this oneness, and that unique creature is man. And as he stated, because we transcend the physical and the spiritual world, because we can understand and fathom the depths of evil in a way that only God could understand, or the way that no other creature can, we have the capacity to truly understand what life without God's oneness would really mean. So going back to this, to Yedid Nefesh, she says, we find it written in the Torah, see now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God with me. I kill and I make alive, I have wounded and I heal. There is none that can deliver out of my hand. And in Deuteronomy 4:39, know this day and take it unto your heart that the Lord is God in the heaven above and on the earth below. There is no other. In Isaiah 43:10 and 11, you are my witness, says the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen, that you may know and believe me and understand that I am he. Before me there was no God formed, neither shall any be after me. I, even I, am the Lord, and beside me there is no Savior. I have declared, I have saved, and I have announced that there is no strange God among you. Therefore you are my witness, says the Lord, that I am God. And finally in Isaiah 44:6, thus says the Lord, the King of Israel and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, I am the first, I am the last, and beside me there is no God. Sorry, my helpmate is stepping out with the puppy. Okay, 36. These verses reveal that the will of the Holy One, blessed be he, that the duty is laid upon us to know and understand that his unity or oneness. Later we will explain the principles upon which the oneness of the Creator rests, as well as the attempt to better define the concept of oneness. I'm not going to get into that too much. Okay, skipping down to nevertheless. Nevertheless, in order to define God's oneness, we must negate its opposite, since the definition of God's oneness is that there is none other than he. So this is the deep meaning behind the shattering of the vessels. The shattering of the vessels is creating this otherness, in a sense, from God. If that's not truly possible, but it kind of is. So we're in this weird kind of paradoxical world. But this otherness, this creation that kind of extends from God, but it has given its own definition and boundaries that give it the illusion of separateness, that is the basis of evil. The illusion of separateness, the boundary from God to something else. And so God creates this reality, and in this reality, because these boundaries exist, there's no interconnectivity, and they shatter. The illusion is that because God is so pervasive, because God is so expansive, that these vessels have no capacity to share. It's like a balloon that bursts immediately. They can't contain the light of God. And so in the shattering comes this need for connectivity. The redemption in all of this is this interconnectivity, dependence and interdependence upon God. The reason for repeatedly emphasizing that nothing is greater than the power of the Holy One is that when we look around us at the increasing presence of evil, at the troubles that have befallen the Jewish people, the chosen people, we begin to wonder whether, when God unleashed the forces of evil, he also lost some of his control over them. God forbid. The fact that hard times have fallen upon us over and over again, that righteous men suffer while evildoers appear to succeed, all contribute to the gnawing doubt. Toby? I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. All contribute to the gnawing doubt concerning the place of evil in the world. This is precisely why God's rule over all the forces in the universe must be emphasized and re-emphasized. On the contrary, the more we truly believe in God's oneness, the clearer it will be that the reality of the forces of evil was created just to show God's oneness. Then it will also become clear that everything that went on during the so-called middle period, the 6,000 years the Creator set aside for his service and revelation of his oneness, was for the express purpose of displaying that unity. The middle period sheds light on the completed world. Prior to this was the period of the world of chaos, and following it will come the seventh millennium, which will be then the world on a higher level than the one in which we presently live. In other words, belief in God's oneness includes the belief that God's plan was to create an imperfect world with an element of evil so that man could in turn be created to make it his life's work to connect whatever imperfections he could in the world. To correct whatever imperfections he could in the world. And when those imperfections are corrected, humanity will see that in the end it was really for the good, in spite of the evil that he experienced. Humanity will say, "Thank you, O Lord, for what you have wrought." Put another way, in the final analysis, even what at first may appear to be evil will seem both generally and specifically to have been for the best. And this is the concept of hashgacha. Hashgacha is this buffer that creates a world of good and a world of evil, but keeps us from annihilation, this creates the interconnectedness that we experience. And the ability to correct the damage that has been done without being destroyed by it. It's the insulation on the wiring to keep us from the direct energy so we won't be annihilated by it. And so in the world of Hod, the world of Hod is understanding and being able to calculate and see that all of this was for the good, that this is the aspect of the Sephirot that will give us the overview of everything that is coming from above, the plan of the Creator. Why did God do it this way? Why did Adam and Eve fall? Why did Abraham not complete his rectification? Why did Jacob, why did all these things occur? That is the aspect of Hod. And so upon meditation, understanding and being able to quiet yourself and elevate yourself to a higher level to see why things are occurring and understand and implement the correct action, that is the attribute of Hod at work. It's kind of like a surgeon's scalpel. It can be used for good or it can be used for bad. So going back to, if you want to stop sharing, and I'm going to share, and I'll go a little bit here, share. Do you have any questions or any comments? Any questions, comments, or don't be shy. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this is I've shared this before. So talking about this world of chaos, so the world that existed that God was rectifying through those 6 days of creation was the tohu vavohu. So the chaos, and so you have the energy, and the vessels being brought into a form, and that form, the rectification that God brought to this lower existence was the idea of Partsufim. And Partsufim are very important, especially at the level of Hod. So at the level of the brain of God, you have, I'm getting into that, yeah. So the idea, the level of the mind of God, or what we would call our unconscious mind, is imagery, is a narrative, is stories. And so a lot of the ways to connect to the higher level of God, and this is the Parsha, is through all of the Moedim, through the implementation of the priesthood. That this is playing out a narrative that connects to the very mind of God. It's displaying and understanding that we may not understand in a logical sense, but we understand in a very high sense from that high level of God. And so we find ourselves drawn to stories, we even make a narrative in our own mind. We have a running story of who we are and what our place in the world is. It may be completely skewed, it may be dysfunctional, but we tell ourselves stories all the time about ourselves, about other people. And you see in the Torah itself, the Torah is presenting to us narratives, trying to explain very deep concepts and very deep ideas. And you see the prophets doing this. Hosea is one of the I think the preeminent one, where his very life, like he goes out and he takes a wife who runs off, and then he goes out and redeems her, despite the sin and the lifestyle that she's fallen into. So we see in the priesthood, we see in the Moedim, we see these concepts, these ideas, these narratives that God wants us to connect to. And as Edith Nefesh points out, that we're constantly emphasizing the oneness of God. We're re-emphasizing the connectivity, the reinforcing God's centrality in the world. And this is very important, because without this constant reminder, and Aaron is at the level of Hod, without this constant reminder drawing us back to God, that it's very easy to dip back down into the material world. And when bad things happen, we can be caught off guard and we don't understand. It can be very easy to say, why me? Like, why is this going on? Whether it's a small thing or a big thing, whether, God forbid it's a tire, you're leaving work and your tire is low and you have to go somewhere important. So the big things, the little things, and without a connection to hope, we might not understand. We might not be able to perceive while they're going. And they might do great damage to us because we've kind of blinded to the reality behind that. So constantly being reminded, constantly being reconnected to the why, which is Hashem, that's Aaron's job. Aaron, when Israel damaged their spiritual connection to God at Mount Sinai, when they fell with the golden calf, God's rectification for this was to bring about the priesthood, and this is exemplified by Aaron. And Aaron is the man of rectification. He brings back he is placed, and he and his sons and the Levites are placed in the center of Israel to be a constant narrative, a constant reminder of who is actually running the show. And so just like the priesthood is at the center of the Levites are at the center of Israel is at the center of the world with the nations around that. That is the narrative. There's the centrality. There's steps to get closer to God. But the narrative, the stories being played out through the sacrifices and the offerings, through Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot, all of these things are narratives playing out. They might seem silly, they might seem external, but they're really deeply connecting to the mind of God. And that is the goal, is to transcend the physicality of the world, to see more than a lemon and a bunch of sticks in your hands, to see what this is supposed to be connecting to. So the rectification comes about at this point. We take this, so there's still the world of chaos, there's still these vessels that are imperfect and not repaired. But we see the interconnectivity that is God saying that this is what I'm looking for. The rectification for the shattering of the vessels was that they would form relationships, that they would have relational aspects to each other. So we get this idea of Partsuf. The Partsufim are these personifications where instead of being just takers, they're also able to give. And so one of the relationship is, father, mother, son, son, daughter, or brother, sister, or husband, wife. So these sephirot, these midot, these attributes and aspects of God now take upon themselves personifications through interrelationships. And so you see this is the rectification for the sin of the golden calf, is these personifications, these relationships, these narratives. The priest is acting as the spiritual leader of Israel by playing out these roles, by having a very, very restricted lifestyle, by bringing sacrifices and offerings, but a distinct clothing, a distinct lifestyle, a distinct position, that it's their interconnection. Now Israel has to work to connect to the high priest, and the pre-high priest, the Kohen Gadol, has to work to connect to Hashem. And when that connection is in place, then there's great blessing. when the connection is not in place, the high priest is struck dead and Israel doesn't get the atonement that they need. So we see that this interconnection is the actual rectification. It's the answer for this brokenness that exists not only in creation but later on in Israel. So we have these. Go on here. I'll talk to them about that. Let's see here. We talked. So in this idea of we can model these. This is really important at Sukkot, but I think it's played in a different way during the counting of the Omer. Is this idea of that there are windows of opportunity where God's light is here to heal certain aspects, to bring about a repair, a rectification, a reconnection. And at this time, Hod, Aaron, and we're getting to the end of Hod, we're getting into this final act of rectification of understanding the why, the scalpel, and understanding our place in the world. And like I said here, it can be likened to this electrical circuit that's being repaired. And so we can switch from the dark side of Hod to the light side of Hod, seeing that why we're here, what is going on, and why does it exist the way it does. Let's see here. I'm going to go on a little bit here. Yes. Oh, thank you. Sorry. So the basic idea of the Partsuf involves the awakening from below. So the Partsufim are the rectification for our world. Sorry, I misspoke there with phone again. Okay. So the idea of the Partsufim is they are the rectification for our relationship to Hashem. So this interconnectivity, this ability to make connections and to not only take but also to give is a very important idea, in that this is from God down to us, and and so God does this rectification down to us. It's like a hand reaching out, is how the parts of fame are explained in one commentary. And so we have to bring a hand up. And the big question is, how do we do that? What do we do to connect to God? How do we bring about this oneness, this understanding of this oneness? And so this idea that the Ramchal had is, how do we truly make this rectification and make a connection back to God? And his answer for everything is literally, the answer is in the oneness of God. That the meditation, and this comes from the understanding of the Ari, is to put to, I'm trying to say Betul. How would you say Betul? Would it be self-nullification? Yeah, Betul. Like it's the idea is that when you rise above your circumstances, like a maze, like you go, cheat when you want to see a maze, you can look from above and you can see how to get through the maze, like what every twist and turn and where it'll bring you, and to turn right, when to turn left. When you're in the midst of a maze, it can be very confusing. It can be very overwhelming. When you get to, you have two choices. There's you turn right, you turn left, and you can be constantly going through the maze and never find the way out if you're constantly making the wrong decision. So the physical world is that maze. We're trapped in this very confusing, blinding, overwhelming. We don't have a lot of insight spiritually, because the world is created to hide God's presence. So the greatest rectification for that is understanding God's oneness, knowing that God is absolutely one, and coming to a conscious connection to this idea that everything that happens in this world, even if it appears evil and unjust and imperfect and distorted and even grotesque, comes from God's desire to bring goodness to the world, and that goodness is for everyone to understand what his oneness is. And so one of the prayers that was devised to really bring about this consciousness, this connectivity, is the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei, the 18 minutes, the standing prayer. Do we have any questions? I know I'm continuing to talk. So when we get to this idea of prayer, and I'm invoking Rabbi Ariel Bar-Zadok here, is the intent. So the intent of the Amidah is to understand God's absolute oneness and his supremacy over everything. As the Ramchal states, as the Arizal states, to constantly be reaffirming the place of God as one, And being physical beings living in a physical world, in a material world, and material world, I'm kidding. But having God's presence obscured in the physical realm, constantly having to fight that, feeling that there is no God, that there is no purpose, that there is no control, that there is no plan, there is no design, and extending beyond the world of chaos and repairing our own keli, our own vessel, and being able to receive God's light, and then, that moment of conscious connection to, I understand that why everything happened, that Moshav at the end of the movie moment, where you can see why these events transpire. And the way to do that is through meditation. And the reason that God implements so many different services in ritual within the Torah is to bring us into alignment so we can understand these ideas and concepts, we can connect to them. Like I said, there's a reason that we like the fairy tales. There's a reason that we connect with movies, is they tell us a story. They convey these concepts and ideas in ways that we can connect to in a very deep way. And this is the idea of the rituals of hand washing, of praying at specific times, of, when you eat, of saying blessings before you eat, of acknowledging God. All of these things have been implemented to bring about a conscious connection to God in everything that we do. And the way to discern that, the way to know, is the scalpel between the physicality and the spiritual world. Knowing how to take a physical material object or a circumstance in our life, and how do we transform it into something spiritual, into something holy. And that comes through meditation and prayer. And that power to do that, the power to understand the aha of our life, is through prayer and through Hod. And Hod's implementation, the implementation of that would be Kavanah, the intent. No, you can't have good intent if you don't understand what you're supposed to focus on. So your intent can be to serve God, but if your intent is to, it's a bad example, but one of the synagogues we visited very early on, their intent was to have a service and to keep Shabbat, but people were literally bringing in ham. I was so surprised. It was the synagogue, the one in Amherst. Anyway, so people were not, they wanted to do oneg and they wanted to, delight in Shabbat, but you can't keep Shabbat by breaking a really, a central command, and that is kashrut, of kosher. So their intent was misplaced. And so again, and Hod gives us the ability to discern where our intent should lie, and we may have good intent, and God will definitely bless that if we're ignorant. But utilizing intent with proper action, that is Hod, bringing it all together, implementing it in a proper way. And so obviously that's through prayer, and the other part of that is through observance, through however people observe when they take upon themselves to do a commandment, and they keep that with the intent to serve God. That's how bringing everything together, our love of God, our desire to serve Him, utilizing the material world in the correct fashion, connecting to God in the proper way, bringing it all together. That's Hod. And when our own lives, taking the idea of Hod is taking the circumstances that we're presently in, the history that we've been, the connections that we have, the relations that we have, and understanding how to formulate a response. How do you, when somebody says something to you that's it could be downright evil or nasty or rude, how do you formulate a response? And so the understanding that at the level of Hod, everything is one. And so this circumstance was brought by God for you to make a response. And Hod is understanding what that response should be. And so we know that the circumstance has been brought about by Netzach. Everything has been orchestrated by God to bring you here. Hod is that, okay, so how do I respond? And today, a good example is I didn't have any Hod. I responded in an improper way to Toby. Instead of, I lost sight of what's the bigger picture, what is the purpose of everything. It's very easy in the moment to get caught up in the emotional aspects, but Hod doesn't have that emotional whole. It's that decisive moment of implementing something, of making an accurate and proper response in the light of God is in control of everything. Everything is from God and everything is one. And so the circumstance that has been given to me is for me to bring about God's oneness in this moment. Not always easy to do. And so the idea of intent in prayer is to bring about this consciousness so we have the capacity to make the proper response. We don't have that conscious connection to the Sephirot, then we don't have the ability to formulate a correct response in that circumstance. And, oops, sorry, what did I just do? Any comments, or do anyone want an intermission break? Yes, we'll talk about the cube. Yeah, I've been a little repetitive. Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing. You guys can post questions or comments. Take the mic.
No, just saying, yeah, cookie break time. Welcome anyone who got in late. We'll record this. It's really fascinating thus far. But we'll be continuing in just a couple of minutes. So if you need to take a bathroom break or get a drink or check your oven for the chocolate chip cookies, just go ahead and do that now. We'll take a couple of minutes. Please, if you have any comments or questions, just right now, if you'd rather type them in, do so. If you want to express them verbally, hold on for a couple of minutes till we get back to the microphone. And anything at all that we've covered thus far. And we'll start up again in just like about 2-3 minutes. And thank you for being here, by the way, everyone. We took a little roundabout thing. Didn't want to go too long without getting back to some of the things Elisheva wanted to talk about. And it works really well with tonight with Hod being the attribute. We talked about the next the set of three of the characteristics, emanations. They're called the Sephirot of relation. And the first one was last week was Netzach, which is very proactive on the right side, kind of the spark to make things happen, like, for instance, like overcoming your shyness or something like that. Initiative is another nickname for it. And Hod is the more reflective, refractive side that takes things and thinks about it and formulates a response by taking in input and measuring it against some type of criteria, hopefully Torah. And so before you spit out your response, you evaluate something according to Torah principles, and then you respond either verbally or through action. So we're talking about Hod, which has some of course, it's much more than that, some very rich and far-reaching dimensions. The Sephirot on the left are also always more complex because they're always dealing with what came from the right and now dealing with it. So they're always more complex. And so in a sense, you could almost say that because now we're dealing with the Sephirot relationship, that, we have to take everything that came before and now use it with our fellow human beings and our environment and internally to ourselves as well. So you can say these lower ones, if you will, are even more complicated. So now what we're looking at Hod, of course, is, it's on the left and it's one of the three at the bottom. So it's in some ways one of the most complex of the Sephirot, if not the most complex of the Sephirot. And not ironically, I guess interestingly, when you get to the fifth day of the week, which is the Hod of Hod, right? When you go through all of the 49, the Hod of Hod is also called Lag BaOmer. So the deepest aspect of possibly deepest of the Sephirot, Hod of Hod, is Lag BaOmer. So that's going to put a whole other spin on just let's roast some marshmallows over a bonfire kind of thing. It's there's some extremely deep concepts here when you start really digging into Hod even further, as you will do on that day. So it's a great book. We'll post the link later. We'll post it in the group too. We'll revising the slideshow. We'll post the revised slideshow in there. We'll post this audio video of this room tonight as well in the group. But please, if you can stick around and participate a bit, we do so much better when people are asking questions, making comments and things like that, so that we can open it up. Part of the whole concept of Hod, by the way, is bouncing things off something before you respond. So, in the theme of Hod tonight, we would like to bounce things off each other. So let's start bouncing after we come back from this short break. And so give it some thought. If people could come up with one question each, that would be great. If not, whenever. But it's always good when people put their own personal thoughts and experiences and things into this, and then share it with others, because we all will find something in that to improve in our own lives. So. All right, we're gonna come back to and if something's hard to grasp, to try to think what a good question would be to ask, like back, if we need to back up a bit or something to reframe or redefine something. Please go ahead and post this question. There's no bad questions. I mean, anybody's welcome in this group. So everyone's coming from a different background, different situation, different experience. It doesn't matter. We're just here to try to share some things that can be sometimes fairly advanced, but trying to do it in a way that is a little bit practical. We hope some of you folks that we get more experience with, we probably tend to push it a little bit harder, because we don't want to just keep repeating things. But there's always new people too joining a group, so it's that balance you have to try to hit, where you want to keep pushing forward, but you don't want to leave anyone behind either. So anyhow, post questions in the text or wait till we get back on the mic. We'll come back in about 60 seconds or so. All right, so we're going to be resuming here in a minute, less than a minute. You're resuming? We're resuming as soon as this other person here has a little drink, so she's not too parched. But yeah, if anyone wants to take mic with the question before we start up again, it's a good time to do it, or after, whatever. We're going to get into some more stuff. Oh, I love this slide a whole lot, by the way. Some genius put this slide together. It just really seems to make a lot of sense, So I'm not saying who put this slide together, but I'm just going to let it go like that. And I'll let her resume before I say too much and get myself in big trouble here.
Thank you. So this brilliant diagram here. So the interesting thing, if I don't know if you can see my little cursor? Oh, it's a little hand. Sometimes it looks okay. So this idea of Hod is, this is the point where your unconscious motivations connect to your mouth and your conscious mind. And I know that in my life, I honestly can't always give a reason as to why I do the things that I do. And sometimes my actions very much frustrate me, because they definitely are being driven by something, but I can't always connect to what. But I do these things. I don't always consciously connect to why I'm doing them. Sometimes they're And, sometimes they're beneficial, sometimes they're not. So at the level of Hod, where Hod is taking in the information from all of the others, and it's actually feeding back too it's taking in information from above and below, and it's formulating what is the response to this, how are we going to respond or act in a specific circumstance. So what is the information feeding into Hod? Well, we can see this in the Hod model. The Sephirot above it are feeding into it, and it's taking information from the Sephirot below. In application of the human mind, we have when if you have a bad habit, understanding why this bad habit exists. For some people, a very common one would be smoking. Smoking is a common habit that people have that's detrimental to their health. Yet people don't always consciously understand why they continue to smoke. And there's a physical component, obviously. You have the physical dependency. But the reason that the person feels they have a need that needs to be fulfilled, what is the driving need behind that? And so part of the logotherapy would say, you're taking a behavior that's self-destructive. What is the connection? What is the reasoning for doing that? And connecting to understanding what process brought you to smoke. Going back to the first cigarette you had, what were the circumstances? Getting really deep there, but bouncing all these different cause and effects in your life. Whatever motivated you to try that in the first, understanding what that motivation came from, trying to connect to it, before you just drop the cigarette. And you can get over a physical dependency of nicotine very quickly, but a lot of people end up smoking again, and it's because they don't realize why they started smoking in the first place. So this is just one example of the application of Hod in our life, is understanding like when you do an action, when you have a pattern of behavior, whether it's how you interact with other people, whether it's a bad habit, or whether it's starting a good habit, understanding at the level of Hod is very important. And so we have this idea of shattering. And if you look at shattering could be a behavior that is not that's not healthy, that's not productive, that actually causes you harm. So you consider this pattern as broken, and you need to repair that. So you need to engage in a healthy behavior. You need to repair your vessel, repair that. The reason that there's a deficiency or a need to do an unhealthy thing, there's something you're making up for in your life. So in this idea of Hod, it's understanding all of the things that are feeding into this behavior, into this action that you're taking, and really being able to search it out and understand, I have a problem with anxiety. Well, I'm anxious because I feel uncomfortable at work, whatever it is. And saying, okay, well, I see that if I have a problem with talking to people, there's a repair, there's something I can do, there's an action I can take in light of a healthy behavior, in light of a healthy pattern you want to implement. And so I'm getting a lot into psychology, so I'm sorry about that. But this idea is like, so what is your purpose at this moment? What is the overarching purpose for your existence? Is it to be burdened by these behaviors that cause disconnection and dysfunction, or is it to cause repair? Is it to cause connectivity? Is it to bring about elevation? Is it to bring about health? Is it to bring about relationship? So that's the idea of Viktor Frankl and his logotherapy, is understanding that there's a higher principle at stake, that there's a higher reason for existence. It's not to get through it to the moment. It's not to, okay, I just got to get through it and it'll be over, or to distract your mind away. It's not to push these unpleasant things into the back of your mind. It's to be a completely integrated whole person. That's the whole purpose of man's existence, is to integrate everything together. It's to see the good and the bad, and to bring it about not in an unhealthy, dysfunctional way, but to bring it about in a healthy, connected way. And Hod is this level of understanding the connections, why they're here, and how do we connect with things healthy. And the most beautiful quote on connectivity is, what is this connection? A word for connection is love. And that's the love of Hashem. Hashem loved us. He made this connection to us through the existence of creation, through bringing us about into the world, by bringing about all these various mechanisms that we have to find God in the world, whether it be through the physical world, whether it be through Torah, whether it be through our own spiritual antenna and experiences we have. But God definitely represents his desire for connectivity, which is that connection is called love. And so our purpose for existence is to connect with our Creator, to see our place in the world, and that is love. That's ultimately the overarching reason for the world for existing is chesed, is this absolute loving kindness that flows directly from God. But to understand that chesed, to see it in its place, we have to see it reflected through the lens of Hod. And because God's chesed in this world is hidden and it's buried and it's distorted and it's disguised. And so Hod lets us, it's that lens. I'm trying to think of, I can't remember it's a puzzle book I used to have, but you put on those glasses and you can see the colors coming through. Can't remember what it was called, but it's this idea that you can see the hiddenness if you have, like, it's a special glasses and you can see the hidden realms, that all of it together, like, oh yeah, all these dots come together, and that's the word I'm looking at. And so Hod is this ability when Hesed is reflected through Hod, when God's absolute loving kindness, you can see it in this world. You can see it in the physical world. You can perceive why evil is here and where the good and the loving kindness of God comes into play in creation. And we can do that in our own life as well, because it can be very difficult at times to understand how in this moment can God be a chesed? How can God be absolute loving kindness, yet this horrible thing happen, this painful, horrible, difficult time? And that is through the lens of Hod, we can see it perfectly clear. And that's so in this idea of meditation and reconnecting back to this consciousness, there are meditations to bring us back to the centrality of God and his absolute loving kindness as it exists in the real world, in the real creation. We get that through the lens of Hod. And that was what Aaron and his sons were to deliver, that God's absolute loving kindness in the midst of an absolute failure. God is a loving, kind God who brought about the rectification for Israel's continued existence in this world. And that's about all I had to say for that one. That I don't have much more to say. And there was one other part of this little presentation I wanted to bring. Yeah, so let's see here. Do I have any questions, comments? Oh, I did not. Okay, when a person connects easily with others, is that love? Yeah, the idea is, and this is the idea of Hod, is the connection has to be in the proper, the actions have to be all brought together. Remember, your intent, your actions, all, and your response all have to be brought together. So, connecting to a person in the proper fashion, expressing love in the correct way is very important. So you see in the Torah, applying, let's say in the case of the Metzora. So Metzora, the person who has leprosy, he's to be kicked. If he has leprosy on his physical person, he's kicked out of the camp. He's, he can't come to contact with people. It seems like a very harsh and cruel punishment to go, to kick this person outside the camp, don't have anything to do with them. They're unclean. They can't be within the city walls. So, you would say that's really unfair. It's kind of mean. He could get sick. He could die. He's alone. He's vulnerable. Why would God want that? Well, if you were to disregard that and just bring him in to the camp and completely disregard that and just, I'm not going to do that. Seems really harsh. I'm going to give him some mercy. Well, that's not love. God says in that moment, the best remedy for this individual is to kick them outside the camp, to do these actions. If you really love them, if you really care for them, you're going to do this seemingly harsh act, which will ultimately be for their good. And so, yeah, when you connect to a person easily, and this is the idea of Hod. Hod is understanding when you come across every person, whether it's your snarky husband or your or your cranky coworker or some random stranger on the street. What do you say to them? How do you interact with them when somebody says something mean to you or something positive to you? What is the proper response? And so this proper application and being able to elevate every circumstance, that's how understanding, taking in that information and saying, okay, like one of my aha moments in my own personal life was working as a cashier at Walmart while going to school. I had somebody just throw their stuff down on the cart and start yelling at me and just swearing, and they were just so nasty. And this is when we were really trying to get into understanding some of these Kabbalistic concepts. And I remember taking a step back, and it's a moment of maturity in my own life, but growing up moment, but also like applying these principles and saying, hey, she doesn't know me then well enough to know, to be this angry. It's something going on with her. And so I was able to make a connection with her. Now, my normal response at that time in my life would just to be completely angry and horrible back to her, because it's a pretty immature response on my part. But that's where I was in life, unfortunately. But I realized in that moment, like, nope, it's not about me getting my little 2 bits in about how horrible, she's acting mean, she's being rude, she's being offensive, and I shouldn't have to take that abuse. But in that moment, I was able to take this principle and switch it around and say, hey, it's not about me. And I was making it about me. It's about what's really going on in this situation. It's not about me. And for some reason, I prayed a little bit and I said, okay. And the words came to my mind. I said, you must be having a really tough day. And she broke down and she started crying. And she said that her husband had died and a couple of months before, and this was the first time she'd been out of the house, and she was just really overwhelmed and she didn't know what to do. And if I had responded how I normally would respond, which is from the ego, thinking of the material world, my response would have been I would have added to her sadness, to her sorrow, to her brokenness in that moment, and I would not have been a vessel of repair. But I was able to really elevate myself and learn a really important lesson at that point, to just, one, it's not make it about myself, but to look at the higher principles and the higher purpose of life, which is at that moment, to be used even for 5 seconds as a vessel of repair.
You had a question about?
I did. When a person connects easily with others, is that love? And that's what I was answering. Yeah. And so our connection, when you really, true love is not always easy to find in every moment. And our response is not always clear. And sometimes it is. And sometimes we can get off base from that, when you go back and you analyze a situation, when you fail or when you fall, or when you let your emotions or other things cloud you, getting back into that whole consciousness, as I like to call it, this analyzing the situation, understanding what motivated you, where you have, in psychology they call it the stress vulnerability model. And I think this is at the level of Hod, is a stress vulnerability, that everybody has stressors and everybody has vulnerabilities, but we also have strengths and we also have unique talents. So at the moment, her stress was going out for the first time. Her vulnerability was she was deep in grief, and her response was to take that negative emotion and it was exuding negative emotions. And so looking at at my analysis of myself at that moment, my vulnerability was I had a lot of stressors going on, and I had been formulating a pattern of really bad responses to people and trying to change that. So having this Hod consciousness allowed me to take a buffer for a moment, to step back from that situation and analyze it and come up with a response that was quite different than what I would normally do at that time in my life. And, I still fail at that level of Hod consciousness. Instead of taking a step back, instead of looking at my own stressors, my own vulnerabilities, and realizing that, I need to have a buffer. I need to do something. And you see this all coming from the Torah. Oh, yeah, please share. Go ahead. I'm going to get off the mic. You go ahead and share. I don't know. Let me escape.
Hey, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I think someone,
Can
right?
you
You
hear
wanted
me?
to share?
Is it Shiva? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm at work, so there's a little background noise. I used to be that way when I was confronted, with the mean person at a store. I used to get really nasty back with them, and that used to come from a place of rejection in my childhood, and that just followed me into my teens and adulthood. And then just one day I had a thought I was at the grocery store with the cashier, and I said, why don't you just show her some love? And that's what I did. I asked her how her day was going, and she shared that someone had passed in her family. And that was a turning point for me that not only allowed me to be more compassionate, but I looked in the mirror and I seen something very ugly. And it takes a while to break bad habits. I did not stop immediately. It took me almost a year to curb that, especially if someone was being mean to my husband or someone I cared about. Then I was in full attack mode. However, now I even pray with people sometimes, or I get their number, give them my number, and tell them to call me, and that keeps me humble, and it keeps my ego in check, even throughout my other relationships in my life. So I realize that a lot of times it does come from people being hurt, or that's just their defense mechanism they put up not to be hurt by other people. That's all I wanted to share.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. That's so cool. I think I really appreciate you gave us some of the background, that feeling of rejection. And that's that idea of being able to connect to that mind, that unconscious. You may not really understand what your motivation is until you really search it out. And when you do, even if you understand that, doesn't, like you said, necessarily mean that instantaneous transformation. You never have a problem with that. You have to repair that. You have to rectify that. And how you do that is by being constantly exposed to the same circumstance and given an opportunity to respond differently. So I know I recognize, like, there's a few times in my life where I recognized a defect or a deficiency in the way that I acted, then constantly had these same kind of circumstances popping up again and again and again. And it's only, real later on that I realized, like, yeah, this is the way you repair it, by having these circumstances come up again and again, and you repair them at a higher and deeper level. And so thank you so much. That was beautiful. And this idea of this whole consciousness, and I use these words, and it sounds so new agey, and I don't mean to be, but this idea of being consciously aware of needing a buffer, needing to step back, needing to have some distance between you and a circumstance. And the Torah is just full of these kind of things, that the buffers, the boundaries, before, being mindful, engaging in life with a mindfulness is just, the Torah is just bursting with that. The idea of, like, in the praying, you'll eat and you'll be satisfied and you'll thank God, and being mindful in that moment to give thanks to God, and giving a buffer between you and the physical world, giving a buffer between you and the action you're about to take, whether when it's choosing food, or you go out hunting, or you go even in more violent kind of actions, like when they're going to war, or when you talk to your children. All of these things, that there's this pause that the Torah inserts, that God inserts into these moments to give you a mindful connection, and give you a deliberate mindful response. You're not meant to be an automaton. You're meant to understand the circumstances and use all of the information to formulate a response to elevate yourself, the circumstance, and the physical world. And the gift, the consciousness that allows this to occur is through Hod. So we can take the Gevura, the judgment, that as it is reflected into our worlds, and see it through the lens of Hod and understand why Gevura is falling, why judgment's here, why evil exists. Or we can take the more negative aspects of our life and reflect it through Hod. We can see the chesed that exists in the world, even in these darker moments. I know I sound like a little bit of a broken record, but this is the power that Hod has. It's like a viewfinder to see the spirituality, the higher reality of the world. It's the ability to really see that. And it's the insulation between the upper worlds and us to keep us in existence. Netzach and Hod play that role. There are advocates, like Moses and Aaron stood up for Israel time and time again, so they were not annihilated and crushed. That's what Netzach and Hod do in our own life. And the other part of this is sometimes the narratives that we build ourselves are important in the moment, but they're not an accurate reflection of who we truly are and why we're truly here. And I'm going to go back to Viktor Frankl in this. He had this very deep connection to his wife throughout the entire time he was in concentration camps. And he found out that his wife had died almost the day that they arrived. And he still used this. He understood that in the moment he knew he was not a dumb man. He knew that the probability of his wife and son being alive was almost zero. But he needed that in the moment to get through that experience. He needed that narrative, that connection, that story. Netzach and Hod create this transient state of existence so we can survive in the moment. And part of our rectification, part of working through that, is that this world, this narrative is transient. This is a temporary condition. This is a temporary state that has to exist for us to get through a specific thing. And sometimes we have to mature beyond that. We learn more, we grow. We need these stories. We need this narrative to survive. And there's a part where we come to a level of maturity, to a level of heightened consciousness, to a level of understanding, of healing, that we can let go of these old narratives and hold and see truth at an even higher level. And so Netzach and Hod can create for us the reality that is a transient reality to get through the moment. So he had to come to grips with the fact that, at the end of this horrific experience, the one thing that got him through was not really there. Maybe he was connected to her in some spiritual way. I really believe he was. But the reality of his world at the end of all of this, when he was liberated from the camps, was there was no wife waiting on the other side. She wasn't there. So his reality had to shift for that new information. He had to take it in, and he had to build a different life. He had to find a new connection. For Viktor Frankl, it was helping others. That was he connected to something even greater than his wife, which was to healing and repairing the lives of other people. So that was the narrative that he connected to after that. That was a higher reason and a higher level of connectivity that he was able to obtain after his entire experience. And so, and so I think that in our own personal lives, some of the narratives, some of the things that we build, that we later find out are not accurate representations of ourselves or reality. Some people get really angry and they get upset and frustrated with themselves, and others have, I've seen these moments. I've seen these moments in my own life. I've seen these moments in people that I love. I've seen the lives that they thought they built shatter around them, and they don't understand why. And the story they've been telling themselves has changed drastically. And so these are moments of opportunities for growth, and it's very painful. But again, this is the reality created by Netzach and Hod. That Netzach and Hod, these are attributes that are that create the physical world. They create this transient state of divine providence, which is not going to exist forever. It's it's a temporary reality to give us an opportunity to repair and to work and to grow and to bring tikkun. But again, in this temporary state, we can still do what we can do. We can take that energy and that opportunity and do a lot of damage as well. If you're, there's a lot of information on the idea of if you these concepts, you can look in a secular application. That's where you get into Jung and Jungian psychology, where you look at these archetypes and collective consciousness and understanding this collective consciousness and the stories that mankind tells himself and that cultures tell themselves about themselves. Our stories are a reflection of our Jung would say, like, the stories are reflections of these archetypes that exist in every culture and every individual. Every person, as I stated, has their own narrative, and Jung would say that we have the archetypes that we build in our own minds that kind of drive us, and we have these narratives that we tell ourselves about the world and our place in the world and about ourselves, and being able to connect to that. That's Jungian psychology. And the other application of that's more, I would say, more on like the NetSoc side of thing. But you have Viktor Frankl, which is finding your purpose, that connecting with your logotherapy, connecting with your purpose, connecting with why you're here, understanding that it's transient. The circumstances of life are transient, but our true purpose, our true reason for being here transcends all of the circumstances and all the details. And so that's Hode in a nutshell. So I'm going to end there. I don't know if Tovi has anything he wanted to say.
No, this is great. Get some questions.
They don't have them. Don't make them come up with them. They don't have them. Yeah. Tovi, you wanna? Again, thank you for your time. And
You were talking about prayer attention.
I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that. I would love to have like an open discussion about that at some point. There's so many ways to do it. There's just a lot of ways to do it. When I read Rabbi, what's his word? When I read Bar Zadok, I really see the beauty of the Amidah. But then there's another really, it's a little hard for me to connect with. I've tried it a couple of times. It's very difficult to connect with. When you talk about meditation and prayer and intention, I'm going to share something here. And I think you can kind of see me. I'm going to share that. So there's another meditative technique. Let me see here. Why isn't it clicking through? There we go. So you see this cube. This is like a physical representation of a meditative exercise. The idea in meditation in Judaism is that it's kind of like taking an ox, a wild oxen, and teaching it to plow a field. That you're taking a very powerful force and you're learning how to control it and focus it on a task. And in meditation, it's taking that lower animalistic drives that we have. I call it the fluffy bunny syndrome, that right in the middle of meditation, when you sit down to meditate, all of a sudden your brain is just completely flooded with the most mundane or oddest thoughts. They just seem to come out of nowhere. And if anyone's ever read Inner Space, this idea when you sit down to meditate and you start to quiet your mind, that flood of things that's just, they call it the chashmal, this what's the word? Like, it's almost like a flood, it's kind of breaking through a crowd, like a crowded room to get to the other side. And it's an experience that everybody who meditates has to go through. So working on a pathway to quiet your mind, to get past all the thoughts and distractions. There are various schools of meditation. Joseph, Caro. Yep, had one. Rabbi Abulafia had another one, and it brings about physical movements with breathing techniques. And so Abulafia utilized this idea, this thought experiment from a book called Sefer Yetzirah, which is focusing on the spiritual boundaries of the 12 dimensions of spiritual space. It's silly because space doesn't have spiritual dimensions, but these boundaries that are created in the spiritual realm that give our world existence and form. And so he has breathing. I think, let me escape from this and I can show you a little bit of what that's about. I have a harder time doing that because I still have a hard time with my fluffy bunny syndrome, where my brain just goes to literally I call it fluffy bunny because it just goes on a little trail, and I'm like, suddenly I'm no longer meditating, and I'm not even consciously aware of the fact that I'm thinking about my grocery list for the next week. And so I kind of have to, that's a discipline that I really need. Did somebody have a question, Toby? So this is an example of Rabbi Abulafia's meditation techniques. Let me see if I can find it. It should, no. So let's see. So it's this idea of using quieting your physical, you're getting your own self, getting your physical lower self out of your own way, so your higher spiritual self you can connect to the higher reality. So this idea is that you exist in all these worlds, that you have a soul that extends all the way to Hashem. And so in meditation, it's clearing the channel, aligning those gates, unlocking that flow so it can come back down. And so it's transcending and getting through these higher worlds. But again, this idea of chashmal, this idea of this fiery storm, this tumultuous realm that we have to get through, there has to be some kind of pushback for there to be a reward. There has to be some kind of I can't think of the word here, challenge. And so that's why meditation can be very difficult. So again, Abulafia came up with these breathing techniques, these body movements to get past this experience of the chashmal, of this fluffy bunny challenging experience that we all have. And so let's see, here's his commentaries. There's different ways to hold our hands, and these are the different vocalizations that he has. So these vocalizations aren't just drawn from they're not just like sound, what's the word I keep saying, these are based on the holy names of God and vocalizing God's names with the different vowel sounds. And so that's where Abulafia's technique comes from. Let's see here. Oh yeah. Oh yes, yeah. I'm good to know that I'm not alone. Yeah. Yeah, I have that, Rebecca. I get so many trails, and it's so hard. And I'm not even consciously, I think I'm focused, and then I realize, oh my gosh, I'm not. I'm thinking about something completely different than what I had started. So the intention group, this idea of an intention group it's interesting because it's kavana. Intention is kavana. So the kavana of these individuals was a step for connection, and to bring about connection, to bring support and encouragement and love to each other. Not like a therapeutic, I'm going to tell you my problems, you're going to tell me your problems, but just to take an individual, relating a specific need or request, and just taking the energy of these individuals and focusing on that. And I think in regards to meditation and bringing us into a focused state of consciousness, getting past the fluffy bunny syndrome is the hardest. And so when I talk about the Shemona Esrei, or I talk about, this meditation techniques of Abulafia, it's how do you overcome that propensity of your brain to just wander off down to, mundane, silly, or even deep things while you're meditating. The idea is not to, to think about your grocery list, or to think about a really a deep question that you had about the nature of the world and creation. But it's exactly that. These people got getting together, starting a little club to try and get past the fluffy bunny syndrome together. And that is the whole idea behind the intent purpose of the intention group. And it's interesting that when they did studies of people who are in a meditative state, that your brain waves shift, they change. And people who meditate on a regular basis and discipline themselves to do this, they actually can change. You can permanently change the way your brain functions. And functional MRI scans of people who meditate, they actually show that the portion of your brain called the amygdala that drives, they call it the lizard brain. So it's that flight or fight. It's that instinctual anxiety part of our brain. It's where anxiety comes from for a lot of people. It's where their reactivity to circumstances come from. Can we enter the wrong realm in meditation? Yes, you can. And I think, again, here comes two things. One, it's your intent. Some of the stories where people deviate and go off into the wrong realms, you can see their intent may have been, I don't know. So here I'm going to go off on a little bunny trail about Rabbi Abulafia. So I have a book that I borrowed from school, and it's all about Abulafia. So I don't know if you realize where Abulafia went in his world. But Rabbi Abulafia, through his meditative techniques, really got a lot of insight. But he thought that his job, he really believed that he had brought a rectification about in his own life, that he could be utilized to bring about a repair of Esau and Ishmael by going through to the Muslim world and to the Christian world, and bring about a tikkun, a repair. His starting point was the Pope. Well, so Abulafia, it's not funny, but it is. Tovi is laughing. But so Rabbi Abulafia sets off on a very, very dangerous trek, especially as a Jew. He so this is in the, if you remember, if you've ever heard about the disputation between Rabbi, Nachmanides and a Jewish convert to Christianity, a Jesuit named, Dominican, named Pablo Cristiani. So the king of Spain at that time had kicked the butts of the Moors, kicked them out of Spain, and he felt very religious. And at the end of his life, he wanted to make peace with God and some brownie points. So he sponsored a debate, which was a very common thing. It happened in France, happened in Spain. Never ended well for the Jews. But Nachmanides knew this. And there had been great disputation in France previous to Nachmanides' event, and the Jews had actually been expelled and the rabbi killed. So he knew that he was in a very dangerous, you can't say no to the king, but he also can't say yes. So Nachmanides debated Pablo Cristiani, and he was a clear winner. And obviously the Dominicans were not happy about this, but the king of Spain not only paid him, but gave him enough protection to allow him to go to Israel. And he did not want to go to Israel, but he had no choice because he would have been murdered in Spain. He wrote about it, and he distributed the accounts of this disputation, and that's what ultimately was the thing that got him exiled. But now Pablo Cristiani, and this disputation and the outcome was very encouraging. It was about 20 years before Abulafia went off. So Abulafia was deep in meditation, and he got some insight that this was going to be, he was going to be the vessel of rectification to bring Esau and Ishmael back into proper relationship. So he sets off to Rome, and he makes it to the Vatican, and he gets audience before the Pope, and the Pope throws him into prison and sentences him to death. And I'm not sure, I think within 3 weeks he died. The Pope dies, and Abulafia sits in jail for about 28 days, and then he's set free with his life, which was highly improbable. Like it was definitely divine providence. I think because the Abulafia's intent was there. I think he had his kavana was to serve God, and I don't think he was doing it out of selfish means. But I don't know what to think about where his meditation led him. And you have the example of the four men who went into Pardes through their meditation and their connection. They enter into a very high level. One dies, one becomes a heretic. What's the third one, Toby? The four went into Pardes. I always get that. I always miss one. The four men went into Pardes.
Only want their names?
No, what happens to them, silly?
Okay. Sorry. But either way.
I want their favorite colors.
Their favorite colors were. Okay, so one of them went cuckoo.
Heretic. Yeah, one goes insane.
Lost his mind. One became a heretic.
Yeah, one became a heretic. One lost his mind. One died.
And the other, Akiva made it back.
Rabbi Akiva made it.
He ended up making a bad mistake.
But he made a really horrible mistake. He supported Bar Kokhba and the whole rebellion, and things really went all pear-shaped for him. So I don't know. And even it's very funny, as in Inner Space, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan says, this is really dangerous, but you should do it anyway.
So you mentioned like intention.
Yeah.
The other one is your own state of being, purity. Like you might have good intention, but if you're like even up, something wrong, it's gonna backfire too.
My intention is not to delve into these realms where I know that I'm not a pure person. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I know that I don't have the capacity to delve into these mystical realms. I don't look at this intention and meditation to do that, but I really look at it as the personal alignment of my own attributes. That, I really do believe if we are the reflection of God, if we're made in the image of God, then we have the midot reflected in our very nature. But the idea is that the reflection is going to be impure, that there are areas where we're strong in and areas where we're weak in. And that's why we need interconnectivity. We need to connect with individuals who have complementary skills and strengths and the ability to help rise us up. And then the other part of this is to bring repair in my own characteristics, my own attributes, to strengthen and to connect to integrate these aspects of my own life back into a whole. There's areas where I'm very deficient in, and there's areas where I'm very strong in, and the goal is to integrate them into complete oneness and to become a repaired keli, a repaired vessel, so I can serve God and serve others better. I can see the older I get, some of it's, I think, just that wisdom that comes with age, but I really do believe that some of this, this Kabbalistic principles have really helped me see, seeing some of the reason for why I'm here, but I think that gives me a lot, but a bigger part of it is the reason why some of the things have occurred in my life the way they do. And so the idea in the meditation group is to not delve into these deep spiritual concepts, but to bring about a restoration and a healing and a repair in ourselves and in other people that we're connecting with. And that was the goal of the intention, the original intention experiment that they did. Bee Season has a part with a child doing a meditation. Yeah, there's some songs. There's been a couple of times where I've been able to get into a meditative state, and I have to be honest, because I'm not used to my brain acting like that. It was pretty frightening, and it wasn't frightening because I had some deep mystical experience. It's just having that quietness. I don't know. I don't have ADHD, but my brain is constantly chitter chatter. This, even when it's quiet, it's not quiet. So.
People say, well, scared of bad things. No, getting close to God is scary.
But I think that brought about, like Tovia said, it brought about this holy fear, not, the holy fear that keeps us from being in. I think this quietness, this I wouldn't call it, I call it fear. I never had that experience where my brain was quiet and I was able to really rise up for the 12 seconds that it occurred. But looking back, I want to get back to that level again. So I think having a holy, having the proper respect and the proper intent is the safety that we're looking at, and as overwhelming, now it's less frightening than it was overwhelming. and I serious when I say it was 12 seconds, it was 12 seconds, because I'd never had my brain quiet like that, never had my brain at that theta waves that you see people switching over to when they get into a meditative state. It was a new experience for me. It's kind of like riding a bike for the first time without, by myself. Like, it's the only thing I can liken it to is when my dad was teaching me to ride my bike, and I'm going, and I look, and behind him, he's like way behind me, and I realized I'm riding on my own, and I immediately fell over. So I think that that's okay, because I obviously got back up on my bike and I learned how to ride on my own. But I think it was like at that moment, that overwhelming, like, I'm actually doing it, and like, oh my gosh, I'm actually doing it, and then boom, I fell. So I think that the meditation in the intention group is something I want to do, because I think it helps. I'll definitely see a benefit for myself, but I think it can help other people. It's just trying to figure out the kosher way, because the way that they did it was I wouldn't call they use a lot of Buddhist techniques and a lot of Buddhist ideas, and I think that Buddhism has a lot of the same concepts as Judaism, but I would like to see it in a more kosher fashion. So I know I said I was going to talk, and I continue to talk, but that was a prayer intention thing. Yeah. Are you on speaker? Oh, anybody else have any ideas or things that they would like to see or do? Tolia, do you have anything? Anyone? Bueller?
We'll be talking more about that in the weeks ahead.
You have to put your mic on. Yeah, we're going to make it happen. It's just a matter of figuring out what's the mechanism for the fluffy bunny syndrome. So, whether it's Abulafia. Hey, if we do too much Abulafia, we may all want to go see the Pope. I don't know. Just kidding. Kidding. There's a few. Gikatia has his meditation techniques. They're all a little bit different. I know that Rabbi, let's see here. Sorry, my belly's talking. But anyway, I like the idea of a meditation group, a group that comes together to just try and help each other and lift each other up and support each other in meditation. And this is the very important thing, is that these groups, like Abulafia had his circle, even Arya Kaplan had his circle of people. All of these rabbis, they knew that they needed to surround themselves with people to help each other, to support each other, and to help elevate each other to a higher level. I think that's also important. That's the rectification, is this interconnection. So, okay, now I'm officially done with the other stuff. Mic's open for anybody.
I have the Protection from Evil book by Ariel Barzadok, and that's been literally scaring me to death, because I have tried to go in meditation before, but after I'm halfway through that book, I really considered maybe stopping, because if I got caught up in another realm, I would not probably even know that I was in the wrong realm. Am I making sense?
Nope, I have that book and I've been reading it. I think that the kind of meditation that he's talking about is a little bit different. One of the things that I appreciate is a rabbi. His name's Rabbi Jacob. Is it Jacob Cohen? Rabbi Cohen. He teaches in Houston, and so he talks about this consciousness, these levels of consciousness, and he actually he quotes Rabbi Ariel Barzadok a lot. So when I talk about these meditation, it's to connect it's to integrate the aspects of yourself. It's like a prayer, and it's a focused prayer. It's focusing your kavana, because kavana is important. Your intent is important. But if your mind is racing everywhere, if it's thinking about the grocery list, if it's thinking about the laundry, if it's thinking about the yard you got to do, if it's thinking about this and it's thinking about that, then how can you have true intention? And how can you really focus your mind and your ideas, and just quiet your mind enough to pray properly, to say the morning prayers, to you know, when you wash your hands, to do it with proper kavana. If you're washing your hands and you're saying the words, but your mind's thinking about washing your hands, and you know, you're running 5 minutes late for work, and is your outfit ironed, and blah 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 blah, then you're really not focusing on the act that you're doing. In Buddhism, it's called mindfulness, and Judaism, it's called kavana. And so it's more about that. It's more about connecting to making the actions you do in this life deliberate. So when you're praying for an individual, when you're lifting somebody up in prayer, when you know somebody has a specific need, your intent is good when you're sitting and you're setting aside time to pray with them. But for myself, and I know that I'm not alone by talking to people, I'm not just, when I'm thinking about praying for them, I'm thinking about all the bad things that are coming. I can, you know, like, oh, it's so horrible, I feel so bad for them. I get caught up in my own ego at that point. And so kavana and this idea of intention is learning how to quiet your aspects of yourself, your own ego, that nefesh bahamot, your animal soul, focusing it, getting it on one track, you know, teaching this wild oxen to plow a field. That's what it is. So you can focus on just this one action. You can take all the elements of yourself and really just, when you're praying for somebody, you're praying for them, and you're not thinking about all the bad thing, you know, and you're not so caught up in the sadness, you know, the empathy that you have for the individual, that it must be horrible. You're not caught up in your own things, that you're actually able to focus your intention like a laser on this one thing. And that's what that is. And there are higher levels of meditation, which are really important, but I don't really believe that I want to go there right now. I don't feel like you. I'm like, I don't feel like I am equipped, nor would I have this desire in this broken state that I am, you know, to go to these higher realms, because I'd be like a tasty snack, or I'd be like a seal in the
like one of the 4 rabbis.
Yeah, I would be like one of those 4 rabbis, and they are much higher level than I am, you know. So when I look at it this way, this is the beginning. This is building a foundation for me to make my own actions more effective, to integrate, you know, all the experiences in my life, and to really be able to quiet my own personality, my own mind, to really get that discipline, to really focus on those things. So when the prayer and intention group it's a series of exercises to learn to get past that your own ego, your own emotional state, to really learn how to train yourself and your mind to have true kavana, true intent. So when you're washing your hands, and you're making this physical action into a spiritual reality. You're transforming that action into an elevated service. When you're sitting down at the dinner table, you're literally making it like an altar before God by your own intent, by your own purpose, and your own actions. So that's what that is. It's not about, you know, traveling to altered state of consciousness and encountering, you know, whatever. I don't want that. Not at all. I wouldn't know if it's a good. I fall for people's stories here in the physical world. I can't even imagine in this. I get so caught up in empathy and other things. I'm like, I don't realize that it's just a scam. So I think that I could be scammed in the spiritual world just as easily, because I'm a bit naive.
I think what I'm trying to achieve is getting over myself, meaning I want to sift through my thoughts, see what the root of my thoughts. That's where I'm kind of trying to go with the meditation. Definitely not trying to go into any realms. I'm trying to get inside of my own head, see where the root cause of my own issues come from, so I can tackle them and start praying about them.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm trying to focus on.
Yep. And this is why I wanted to jump in at the level of Hod, because that is the consciousness state that is truly important to bring about this rectification. And so it's about finding the root of why you do what you do. You know, because in our desire to help other people, a lot of the times I find, you know, my desire to help other people, I find my own self getting in the way of that, even if it's helping myself. And so to truly be the vessel, if I really want to help others, and I truly do, I mean, you know, and I think a lot of people in this room have that desire, and they act in that capacity already. But if you truly want to help yourself and truly want to want to serve God, and you really have to have the ability to do that. And it's about healing yourself, repairing yourself with the Kavana to ultimately connect to God and to be a vessel of repair. And so that's the intent behind that. And that's what Kavana is supposed to be, that ultimately everything leads back to the source. And if you can't be a mechanism of repair if you are constantly causing more damage, and you may not even understand why. So exactly that. And that's what that intent group is supposed to be. And so the first exercises are about learning to quiet yourself, learning to meditate, because when there's constant chatter, when there's constant noise, you don't understand, you don't have the ability to connect to I hate using the word unconscious, but those above the conscious thought level of why you're doing what you're doing. And by meditation and by quieting your mind and disciplining that, getting that discipline and working on that, then you have the capacity to understand. You can recognize a thought when it comes into your mind and search it out and understand it better. And that's why we're here. That's the first step of repair, is being able to repair yourself. That's when that's the whole idea of prophecy, connecting. When you're able to repair yourself, like the high priest on Yom Kippur, he would go through he would do sacrifices and offering for himself and for his family. He would wash, he would he would go through these various stages to prepare himself to obtain atonement at this really high level. And that's a physical representation of meditation, to serve God, to repair yourself, to cleanse yourself, to focus yourself onto a specific task, to be able to be elevated to do a specific action. So, yeah. I think Tovia is leading the other group with I'm kidding. The high spiritual group. I'm totally kidding.
Sorry, what am I doing?
I
missed something there. No, what you brought up a really interesting point. Though. A lot of people think meditation, and they start thinking like, "Oh, you're going to expand." It's really more about setting boundaries and all of that, so that you go, make that kind of connection. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm feeling good about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. We both have a little more free time than usual the next several weeks. So yeah, so this is good. So I'm going to post a slide thing here in the room and everything else. So yeah, everyone has to go back in the group, say this was the best room ever. Too bad they all missed it all. And just, I'm just kidding. Yep, greatest room ever. And we were all sworn to secrecy. That's a good way to put it, Oh, I'm fading? Yeah, I know. I've been fading for years. That's what everyone tells me. Everyone tells me I've been fading for years. It's sad. Well, thank you for my better half jumping in there and doing just an outstanding room. I hope you can hear me. So posting stuff in the room as soon as I can over the next day or two, and we will start talking more about the prayer intention group. We got 2 more Saturdays with the Omer, going into Shavuot, and that's when we probably want to start getting into it. So we'll start developing some ideas and thoughts and seeing who wants to sign up for this crazy stuff. And y'all be guinea pigs for this experiment. So, all right. Well, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be good because we're gonna just take everyone's into consideration, where everybody's at, and like she said, tread carefully, but still push the envelope at the same time. So it will be good. I'll post some meditation resources too. I've got some good links on things that are already out there that people can take a look at and just maybe comment what they think about those things. It might give us a little bit of idea of how to direct some of this too. So I'll post some links to some things that are already out there that are very different and interesting. So, all right. So thank you again all for being here. Chesed of Hod today. It is the expansive loving kindness within Hod. So we took a big proactive step here, which is Chesed regarding Hod. So the whole general feel of the evening fits with the Omer pretty darn well. And I'll be still posting stuff about the daily Omers, daily Omer count today, and some pictures. And I posted pictures of my dog instead, so I'm going to have to replace those with put some pictures of my dogs on the homepage, my homepage. So I'll have to go back and post the Omer count and in the group. All right. Thank you all very much. Again, if you think of anything before you go to bed tonight, questions, comments, post them in the group, and we will always keep looking over there just to address those things. All right. Shavuot Tov and adios.